Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iron Canon Podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I'm coming to you from the Star Wars Underworld North studio here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And as always, I'm joined across the continent by your friend and mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I am doing great. It's actually sunny outside. It's been pretty cloudy and gray for a while, so it's like, ugh. So it's actually a nice sunny day. Hooray!
There, cloudy and gray. SoCal doing its best. So Ontario. So Ontario is not a thing. Southern Ontario impression. There we go. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Enjoying enjoying the show that does come out in about 24 hours, but we won't talk about it. We're talking about Paper Canon. We're just trying to keep our spotlight on the books and comics from the galaxy far, far away, and continue that spotlight with a new feature called Great Moments in Paper Canon. I made it up last week. We'll see what happens. This week we look back on the first arc of Charles Soule's epic 2017 Darth Vader run. We hope you don't say no, but stick around instead. All right.
Yes.
Yes. Say yes. Say yes. First, let's get the plugs out of the way. That's great. It's a great comic book. I love it so much. By the way, you get the plugs out of the way. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Iron Canon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Here on the Underworld YouTube channel, we got YouTube memberships, we got super chats, we got the comment section downstairs. We can let us know what you think. Like, give us a like, give us a follow, etc. Chat away, ask us questions on stream, and we'll get to them, especially if you give a super chat, support the channel. We got the Star Wars Underworld Discord. Check the link below. Minty fresh. Let us know, Joel, how's the Discord doing?
Discord's going great. We did a movie night last night. We watched a famous classical film, The Hidden Fortress.
Was it last night or was it Friday night?
Friday night, which was a lot of fun. This week we're taking a week off, and then we're coming back hopefully with a game night. So click that link below. And always every week for the next couple more weeks, we are having in place of the Star Wars Underworld main show, we are having get-togethers where we talk about the latest episode of Ahsoka. So if you want to chit-chat about Ahsoka with us, we do. That's the only time I'll probably bring it up because that's Discord related.
Yeah, there you go. It's behind the wall there. You know, we're kind of still trying to get the leverage. The WGA and the Screen Actors Guild make sure they have their leverage. But you know, that's the funny thing about that show is it's so good that we can't help but talk about it. So we find ways to talk about it. But still, hopefully the guild and the Screen Actors Guild, the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild, and ACTRA, the Canadian guild, getting a fair deal. You know, certain Marvel VFX, they're unionizing, so things are moving, things are changing, and I think that can only lead to better quality content, better standards, happier employees. I mean, come on, it's 2023.
Yeah,
figure it out, folks. Anyway, yeah, one last thing to plug here is the tractor beam. Chris Abbott and I, speaking of things that aren't struck, we can definitely stories we have shining the spotlight on books, in this case comic books. Every Wednesday, comic books come out every Wednesday. Chris Abbott and I, Star After, talk about them every Thursday. That's 12:15 Eastern time. Every Thursday, grab your comics, grab your lunch, or if you're in Pacific time or wherever, grab your breakfast, grab your lunch, 9:15. If you're free then, and join us and check us out. Yeah, on the tractor beam coming up. We're doing. Let's see. I looked this up. I looked this Bounty Hunters number 38 by Ethan Sachs, and D Squad, Dark Droids D Squad, the Return of the D Squad. That's gonna be exciting. That back box. I hope that book flies off the shelves. That's gonna be fantastic. Bringing back that arc and that whatnot. The much maligned D Squad, but very curious to see what they do, bringing it into the Dark Droids crossover event. They're gonna be heroic. We know that, but. Anyway, check us out there at 12:15 Eastern time on Thursdays, right here. You don't have to go anywhere. Right here on all these social channels. The way you're watching right now, just don't change it. Just keep it on. I mean, that won't work, but just stay on the channel, and all the ways that you're watching this podcast, you can watch us on Thursdays. All right. This week in Star Wars, Joel, I'll let you jump right in.
Yeah, so another uneventful week, at least in terms of stuff we aren't going to talk about that much on the show. Because trust me, we want to. Oh, we want to. But in terms of just regular thoughts about Star Wars, I was thinking about last week's topic when we did our great discussion about authors. That was a lot of fun, and how the idea of every author has their own canon. Every author has kind of their way they think the Star Wars universe works, in every book, comic, show, thing we did, video game, etc., etc. It's sort of a mirror into how they view the Star Wars universe. And then you asked me, how do I view the Star Wars universe and whatnot?
Mhm.
Well, another thing I've been thinking about, and kind of relates to this comic we're going to talk about a little bit later, is I kind of have a rule of thumb that unless something directly contradicts it, or just is completely irreconcilable to the current state of the Star Wars universe, I kind of just go with whatever legend said used to be, whatever the
Yep.
definition was. Like, for something as simple as, how many cannons does this Super Star Destroyer have in its ship? I don't know. Legend said probably somewhere in the source book, so I'll just go whatever that said. Or maybe a little bit bigger, but unless Charles Soule ever gets to do that Palpatine pitch, as far as I'm concerned, Plagueis is still the go-to Palpatine rise to power story, more or less. There are a few things with Dooku that no longer match up,
Mhm.
but more or less, Plagueis, Moon, Tenebrous Master, Biss, met Palpatine, Naboo, all that stuff went down more or less the
Yeah.
same. Funny if he did get to do Charles Soule got to do Palpatine Plagueis, not Plagueis, Palpatine.
Yeah. The
Charles Soule
rise
got to
of
do a Palpatine
Palpatine. Yeah.
story only
Yep.
because sorry, that'd be the second time he's done a story that sort of takes the place of a James Luceno book. Charles Soule Vader run, obviously.
True.
Vader Year One, we had in Legends, that was Dark Lord Rise of Darth Vader, written by, of course, James Luceno. So it's good. James Luceno. I don't remember it that much, so I can't really do a lot of compare and contrast, sadly. Which would have been fun. But yeah,
Yep.
it's like stuff like post Andor era. I can't really reconcile with the Legend stuff, but like a lot of prequel stuff can mostly fit. A lot of
Yeah.
Old Republic stuff still gets mentioned here and there, and so it's like,
Mhm.
probably a lot of it's you could just kind of equate the basic premise. But that's kind of my view of it until something automatically just contradicts it, or just something becomes so irreconcilable it can no
Yeah.
longer fit.
I mean, something like how many cannons does Star Destroyer have? I mean, the only thing that matters is the Dragon Con trivia contest or whatever. Like, it doesn't really have too much story detail. So sure, why not? The different things. Yeah, I mean, different story beats, different ways things go. I mean, that's the thing I keep thinking about, that the Plagueis novel. It's so recent too. Still
That too.
relatively recent.
Oh yeah.
That's still in our consciousness. That they're not going to touch it because it's so beloved too. If it was kind of like, we're not sure about this book, whatever, then either then they'd probably wait 20 years and then bring out some really obscure reference from it, because that's what they've done for some other things. But yeah, it's I mean yeah, it's either, I mean, all canon means, so that's what I keep thinking about here. All canon means is within the paper world, we're going to be binding on future storytelling. Within the within the screen world, they're going to be binding on future storytelling. I
I
won't
mean,
get there.
paper has to adhere to what screen says.
Yes,
Not
that's
what.
true too. Paper also has to screen. It doesn't necessarily go the other way around, and we've been back and forth with this for the last year and 3/4 or whatever, how long it is. But yeah, I mean, that's another thing about Legends, right?
Mhm,
I mean, we've talked about this lots too.
mhm,
There's so many great stories there. If
mhm.
you love them, read them, enjoy them, whatever. I go to Backer Phoenix. I go to used bookstores, the basement of Backer Phoenix at the Harvard and Spadina here in Toronto, and
Mhm.
go down there, and they got the used books. And if they have first editions of Heir of the Empire,
Right.
for 15-20 bucks, or first edition of whatever, that's a good collector's item too. So there's that
And
part of it. But yeah, Rise of the Dark Lord, I have it in softcover. I should read it. Speaking of used bookstores, but yeah, I'm sure it's pretty great. But
yeah,
yeah,
and
it's very good.
I just want to talk about one more thing that kind of
Mm,
crossed my mind, but it kind of relates to canon, and it kind of relates to canon versus artistic intent versus kind of how things
sure.
mold. And I was thinking about this in terms of like, I was thinking best about this in terms of Force Awakens and how
Mhm.
we have retroactively added deeper thematics to where I don't think were there, but now they are. And I feel like both the real world and new canon stuff is really playing on this. So it's like, okay, So, and the biggest thing is the First Order. I don't think J.J. Abrams created the First Order because he foresaw the rise of fascism in our country again. I think he just wanted to do his Empire vs. Resistance.
Both of our countries, just putting that out there.
Both of our countries. The world. It's a global problem.
Yeah.
But 2016 happens. We all know what happened. So now it's sort of like when people, like, I remember back in the day in 2015 when people were like, the Empire just came back. You guys blew up the Empire. You sillies. This is ridiculous. And then, 2016 happened. Like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
So, like, now he's sort of in newer stories with, Bloodline,
True.
other things. We're kind of playing that whole grander story of, the remnants of the Empire still hide in the shadows, and they're trying to make a comeback.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of that weird adding on artistic intent that was probably never there. But is it ever evolving canon? It's like, doesn't matter if it wasn't there. It's there now.
It's there now, yeah. And also, the medium is the message. The content is the audience. The content is the audience. That's the second part of that with McLuhan, right? That we have an active role in what a story means, what a story says. I do remember that. I remember 2016, Rogue One comes out, and I guess Last Jedi and all that, and you had Republicans being like, boycott Star Wars because it's anti-fascist. They got it. They got it right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's and we always read things into it, and that's not reading. That's how we engage content. It's how we engage material. It's more than that. It's how it is. Absolutely. I mean, every time I talk about Jedi, every time I'm talking about the Force, what am I doing? Versus how, say, some other folks would talk about Jedi and the Force. Although, interestingly enough, was it last week? You were reminding me when I was talking about how, I think John Jackson Miller is going to be all, oh, the Jedi screwed up and they failed and everything. And it was like you were reminding me, no, I think it's more complicated than that because of my own real world convictions. So, there's definitely, I mean, and then, we have to be cognizant of that. We have to be aware, and we have to say, and that's another thing is there's different ways of reading the politics of Star Wars, right? And now that we're on that, shout out to Stephen Kent over at I don't know what he's doing now, but in terms of Star Wars podcast, he has a Substack, wrote a book, Star Wars, kind of an inspirational, life lessons. For him, it's the rebellion is all about this libertarian argument against massive government overreach. Okay, I mean, that's there too, if that's what you want to focus on, I think. But
I mean,
we can disagree politically, but I think I can see where he's coming from, and we can have a I don't here's an just a tangent. This is a tangent. I'm gonna go on a tangent here.
Tangent. Let's go.
We can have we can debate, can have Dragon Ball knock it out. No, I'm right, you're wrong, whatever. And some things we have to have that. In a lot of things in life in our society, we've forgotten to just listen and learn what other people think and just be curious about that. Ted Lasso, be curious, not judgmental. That's me in my brain. So in Star Wars fandom, in everything in life, just be curious, not judgmental.
I mean, hey, you can watch Rogue One, and I've heard plenty of people who say, Mon Mothma was right, and then people say, no, Mon Mothma sucks. Saw Gerrera's right. I don't know who's the right. There's technically no right answer. I don't think there's any right interpretation. And also, I would also think there's no right. Sorry about that. Motorcycle's going outside in my house.
It's fine.
And also, I don't think there's any right interpretation either, because I don't want to turn this too much into a candidate debate because we got stuff to talk about. But so long as there's no central creator anymore, like with George Lucas decided what Star Wars meant.
Yeah.
But with everyone now kind of doing their own thing in Star Wars, they kind of get to decide what this meant. So there's no central point in Star Wars, which I'm okay with. I know some people aren't. I'm okay with. Yeah. So you can make a story set in the original trilogy that might be, more pro Saw Gerrera, then make another story in the sequel era that's more pro Mon Mothma, and then make another story in the post-sequel era that says more Saw Gerrera is right. Because because there's no central point to the grander story of Star Wars anymore. It's kind of like, well, I don't think it's trying to make this grand point for the whole universe. I just think this particular story has a particular viewpoint, and then this other story has another particular viewpoint. And then, there are stories where it's like, you can debate it. Just, we can both see two things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to jump in there and say, even when George Lucas was writing Star Wars, whatever, once, I mean, that's maybe thing he struggled with, right? Say J.K. Rowling struggled with. Once the film's out there, he doesn't own it anymore. He doesn't own its meaning anymore. He doesn't have sole right to its meaning.
Well, J.K. Rowling's a whole different problem, but
right. Well, she's the extreme of that problem, I'd say. But George Lucas, even in Dave Filoni, just because he has a very influential role in the meaning of it, and George Lucas would have had the most influential. But again, we all bring everything, our whole lives, into the movie theater with us, into reading the comic book with us. It's inescapable, and that's something we all have to understand and grapple with. So
can I add one more thing? And I'm sorry, but you brought this up. But talk about George Lucas.
Good conversation.
I was reading some interesting talks about the whole Jedi attachment thing.
Yeah,
and they kind of went into the whole argument. And I would have read it as we had some more time, and I decided to make this my week of Star Wars. But I'm just going to kind of summarize it, where they kind of read it as the whole George Lucas being very pro Jedi, no attachment thing. That's how you do have a good Jedi. He started doing that after Episode 3 was done, and he wasn't making any more of this. Now, had he made Episode 7, 8, 9, maybe he would have doubled down on it, but he never got to. So all this Jedi no attachment business is just George talking about his universe after the fact. And obviously, they're making stuff, and I feel like most of the stories kind of don't adhere to the whole Jedi can't have attachments thing, or at the very least, Jedi can't get married, like Kanan, obviously. That's sort of great example right there.
The order's gone.
And obviously, going back to, the reason Vader got snapped out of it because of his attachment to both Luke and obviously Padme in retrospect. So
that's true. I mean, I'll say again, the way, and this is what you reminded me of last week, is the way episodes 1, 2, and 3, and this illustrates my point. The way those films are made and the story that those films are told is far more sympathetic to the Jedi than most people give them credit for. Right? It's they're trying to do their best in an impossible situation, especially Obi-Wan, and they're being the Shroud of the Dark. They're up against it, well out of their depth, because Palpatine is just that great and just that powerful, just that smart, and so ultimately has to be his undoing. But attachments in of themselves for George Lucas aren't the problem. And here's the thing: is me having understood and being connected to centuries of Western Christian monastic tradition, and clerical tradition, priestly traditions, I'm sympathetic to that. I don't see celibacy as inherently repressive and evil. It's more complicated than that. But but that's my point, is someone who does is going to see that and point that out and say, and this is the example I bring up all the time, but that's the point. The medium is the message, the content is the audience. Who's to say George Lucas is absolutely right on everything? Yes. Now, I happen to agree with a lot of what he's saying about that, but I mean, that's why we've got these podcasts going. It's why we have, that's why in 2023, how many decades, it's 40 years after Return of the Jedi, 46 years, 47 after A New Hope, we're still talking about this because we still have opinions and perspectives, and the world is changing. And so if the world changes, then a film made in 1977 is not the same film in 2023. It's a different text because it's a different audience. And
I say when you're adding more stuff to it.
Well, there's that too, McClunky,
Oh no, I'm not even McClunky. I'm just mean like, George made the prequels to a 1977 film in 1999.
Yeah.
George Lucas might have some connective tissue in his life, but he's not the same guy he was in 1977. No one is. At least I hope not.
The artist is different.
Yeah.
That's true too.
His philosophies have sort of expanded upon, like, if he had made a sequel, he was getting all into that whole metaphysics, microcosm stuff. So,
would have been juicy. Would have been juicy. One thing I did want to say about Mon Mothma, and I don't know what I think about this. There's this weird discourse going around with again the last comment about this show that's on. Like, is it depicting Mon Mothma as responsible for the First Order? And that's the Twitter discourse. Who cares about the Twitter discourse? But it's an intriguing thought that when you talk about the Mon Mothma Saw Gerrera distinction, like if Saw Gerrera was around, if Big Blue Guy is coming, you better what he'd be doing, right? That's interesting. I'm just thinking of that now. So
I mean, no, I can't.
We'll talk about it on Thursday. About it on Thursday. Join the Discord, behind the Discord wall. Maybe I should actually join in that too.
Yeah. It should. I mean, I got opinions on that, and I mean, we know what Leia's gonna do 30 years later when First Order actually does show up in Bloodline. She's like, leaving the Senate, I'm out.
This is the problem with this show. It's just too good.
I know.
We can't not talk about it. We got to stop.
Okay, but yeah.
Anyway, one last thing I do want to say. Speaking of a Disney Plus streaming show, on the tractor beam, this is kind of a bit weak in Star Wars, but one of those things. If you want to hear Chris and I just light into a whole genre of comic books called comic adaptations of shows, the Obi-Wan Kenobi comic adaptation doesn't work. And we go into why it doesn't work, and it's kind of juicy how we just it's one of those rare things where you encounter something in Star Wars that you just dislike. Not because of the story, just the whole medium and the way they've done it and the way they tried to figure it out.
They got a very bad artist involved who just kind of does shading and tracing.
Well, so that's actually something that came up. Salvador LaRocca. Chris was saying so in the Jason Aaron run, the beginning, he did a lot of just completely photoreal, basically take a photograph and stick it in. It worked. The art worked really well. I really like the art. It fit because it captures the feel of the show really well, because that's the thing, it's an adaptation. But yeah, the actual blocking of the story. Jodie Hauser is a Jedi in the Council faced with an impossible situation because she has this Sith Lord telling her what to do, called Marvel and Disney, saying you gotta cram one episode into one arc, one comic book, and just the pacing's all off and everything. So I just think it's funny to note sometimes things come up that you just don't work. And
her Thrawn adaptation though is really good.
It's fantastic. Age of Republic.
I like her Thrawn adaptation more than the book itself. If I'm gonna
really, yeah. I mean, to have that's the thing. It's elevating it from not elevating. It's that takes it from a prose novel to a visual medium, which is amazing. It's the first time. I mean, that's a long tradition of adapting the original Thrawn trilogy has been adapted into comic book form. It's the only one they've done so far. They should change that. They should do more of those. But yeah, Jodie Hauser did a great job with that. Probably because she was under less constraints, because it's a novel, and so it isn't necessarily the natural breakup. She could actually pick out how the plotting works out. With this adaptation, she couldn't, clearly, because she can do way better. I mean, her like Age of Republic is one of my favorites. I think I gave an honorable mention last few weeks, but it was really that quiet. Oh no, I included it as one of my must reads. Age of Republic, and especially the Qui-Gon one shot, chef's kiss. So yeah, it's just funny how Star Wars sometimes does these things. But yeah, you won't be hearing the Kenobi adaptation on Tractor Beam anymore, but there's some other things coming down the pipe. So
he was also going to do the Rise of Skywalker adaptation too, I think.
See, that could also work, because it's one, like, those adaptations can tend to work better. Like the Rogue One adaptation apparently is great too. So adding new things, that's another thing. It just doesn't add anything. It takes things away because it has to cram it all. It's like watching sports highlights. So anyway, that's enough of that. That's just my week in Star Wars. Why don't we dive in, Joel? Speaking of comic books that not only did it work. It's like, right.
Yeah. All right. Charles Soule Vader run. So yeah, let's go back to 2017. Yeah, the second Vader run after Kieran Gillen's ended, taking place before, well, during the prequel era, right after Revenge of the Sith. I feel like I got into this one a little later in life than I did the Kieran Gillen one, which I kept up. Although I had a thing where I kind of dropped off comics for a while and then kind of came back. Yep, there it is. Oh, is it signed?
Yeah, it's signed. He signed it. So funny story about this. This was at Fan Expo, Comic Con, one of those two. Back when he was small potatoes enough to have a little booth, just a little table, and sorry, 1 second. And he had to have a little table, and I came out. I was wearing my prequels T-shirt, and he's like, "Yeah, so you must like what I'm laying down here." I was like, "Yeah, I love it. It's so great." So anyway, yeah, so it's signed just on the lightsaber. It's the way he signs all those books. But anyway,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember, I don't actually remember reading it when it came out a lot. I don't have very good memories of those things, but I do remember like coming back to it when it was in trade. And yeah, it's overall a pretty good book. I go back and forth on whether or not I like Gillen's or I like Soule's more, because like I really like especially with like by the end where you get to the Mon Cala arc and Vader down.
And that last issue is also the Mustafar issue.
Yeah, the Mustafar issue, that's really good. So that was really good. But yeah, I think looking back into like even the early stuff was like pretty fun. Really dived into the things of like the Anakin Vader dichotomy, especially early on. Some of the early days of the Empire. Those are fun. Those are cool. The bleeding crystal visions, those are always fun, especially when especially the payoff at the end.
Yes.
Certainly things, like you kind of, I think maybe like now that you have the full picture, certainly things pay off a little bit more. But no, it's really good. I really liked it. Great art. I feel like I'm doing the ending already. Thank you, folks. Good night. But yeah, overall, I really liked it. It was good. Vader tends to always have some of the better runs, I think, in general. So, yeah, whether or not I like which one I prefer, Gillen or Charles Soule. I mean, I think I like Soule. Maybe I do like Soule just a bit more because of the ending and how it ends with the Fortress Vader stuff, which is some of my favorite stuff. But we'll get to that later. But yeah, fun stuff. Sorry.
Audio intruding. Yeah, so in this comic had some pretty big shoes to fill, right? Coming off of the Kieran Gillen run that ended in spectacular fashion. And then it took those shoes and it stuck them on a dam, and it threw the shoes off the dam, and then it flooded the dam and destroyed the shoes. It said, "I don't care. I'm gonna be the best comic of all time." Just reading this again, I read it issue to issue, and I loved it then. But reading it now, ready to read in one sitting. I read it in 2 sittings this weekend just to prepare here, and reading it in one, just the gripping story in itself already, how concisely, how perfect of an introduction it is to what Soule is going to do this whole run, and then everything that all the storytelling we've had after it, Greg Pak comic, and in High Republic, and everything there. Everything it lays down again to the end of issue 25. It reminded me this is my favorite comic book of all time, bar none. 2017. I mean, I do not see it being replaced. I do not see it being topped, because in part because it deals with my favorite question: is what is the relationship between Anakin and Vader, and it goes into it and goes for it. But just like everything with Charles Soule, it does that. When you're reading a Charles Soule comic, you forget you're reading a comic book. You're just so gripped by the story. You're still so into it. I messaged you, Joe, last night. Is like, they don't make comic books like this anymore. Why don't they make comics this good anymore? Obviously, that's not fair. But it's only been 6 years ago. But yeah, it's to hit the ground running that way. It's just unbelievable. I'm going to keep gushing about it. If you haven't read this comic book, go read it and come back. This video will be here because we're gonna spoil things, but
spoilers.
It stands, just even this arc by itself is already so spectacular, and then it builds from there. Just to think that it actually just gets better from here. I again, like, you talk about things that don't work. This I'm just gushing over because yeah, it is my Star Wars in such a profound way. Just as much as Revenge of the Sith is, just as much as High Republic is. This comic book is, and so yeah, and by that I mean just the things I love. Not that it's anything else. You know what I mean by that. So just being reminded of that and reading it in one sitting and how tight of a story again these 6 issues are. And yeah, things that I'd remember. That's another thing is all these things we're getting at. I remember they stuck with me. They were clearly got into my noggin. Oh yeah, this happened. I didn't remember that it all happened in the first arc. But I was like, oh yeah, this happened. That was really impactful, meaningful for Vader's story, for Anakin's story. And so
I remember more the back half than the front half, but I think that's because Fortress Vader's like my favorite thing in Star Wars. So
it's so great.
Yeah. So. Yeah, but no, I mean just the castle in general. Yeah. Oh, well, by the way, before I continue, I just want to say, hello, Darth Maul. Hello, Andrew. Darth Maul clearly here likes the Vader run. He's happy we're doing it. So
yeah, there we go.
What was okay? So you mentioned Revenge of the Sith. Mm-hmm. Shall we just get started with the first scene? No. Okay, so this is something I find kind of interesting, especially in terms of like the paper versus screen kind of debates that happen online. People get so you got the whole Ahsoka thing with Tales of the Jedi. Redoing that. But what's interesting about the no scene in Charles Soule Vader run is it is not a 1-for-1 remake of the no scene.
No.
It's not. It is not. It's not. Vader's not going, no. It's a very much more like, no. It's like, a guy we got. I just think that is something really interesting about taking off. It's not. It's not a retcon. I don't think that's I don't think that's the proper term. But it is certainly taking clearly the scene, the no happened, but it's not performed the same way. It is different, but it is a much more different type of no. It's just like almost like kind of almost changing the characterization a little bit of the no moment, and obviously then we act. Obviously then Palpatine's like you killed Padme. Zippy zap, I'm gonna put you in your place. That's what happened. He said it, zippity zap, I'm gonna put you in your place.
Yeah, that's it.
But I guess I'll throw it to you, Patrick. Can we talk about I think I've sort of loosened you on canon by the law must be done precise.
No, pretty quickly. I'll admit that.
But how do you kind of view this sort of like I guess what I call. Is it a reinterpretation of the no moment? I don't know what word to put it, but it's certainly not a 1-to-1. No. It's not the 1-to-1 of the no. That's for sure. The no.
So reading this back through issue number 25, you're reeling it as this is a Darth Vader comic. This is Vader's own perspective on what's happening. Yes, we have kind of the God's eye view with the film or whoever, and the camera's eye view is and it's kind of goofy and comical. But Vader doesn't find that goofy and comical. He's angry. He's terrified. I mean, probably a little terrified. He's like, for the first hint that this father figure has lied to him, and so he pushes him with the Force, and saying, okay, the Sith was going to be my salvation, and now it's my condemnation. It's my damnation. What do I do here? I'm going to push back. And that moment. I mean, I think the most poignant moment of that is being put in his place. Right? It's the first time Palpatine has been Darth Sidious and is actually being abusive to him. That's the shock, and of course that has some great payoff in a few issues later. But it's definitely in Vader's perspective, and it's really setting the tone, setting the stage for what Charles Soule is doing. I mean, it doesn't change the facts and the details of what happens, because we don't see the no, and then it gets cut. Also, I mean, that's the thing, is different media. I mean, the Matthew Stover novelization, which is it's Legends. That changes a whole bunch more things. Which is the right event, which is the correct version of events, whatever. I mean, sure you can say it's the film, but
I mean,
for
I'll push
Vader,
back.
it's what's the feeling in the moment, what's the desire, what's the hope for in the moment, um, and there's almost I'll say this, it's closer to the final version, I should say, of Return of the Jedi, where there is this no, 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 and then you have the comical, whatever. But I mean, it always, and just like that's the thing with these comics, and it's the thing we also talk about. It reframes the film moment, reframes the screen moment, and
that's a better word.
Reframes both screen moments. Really, I mean, just the way. Well, yeah, I guess that was added later, but it reframes and it is more connected to the Return of the Jedi moment in that way, because I mean there's still lightning happening, right? And this time Anakin is able to you need to be Anakin in order to actually prevail. But yeah, it is this funny thing, and it's great that Charles Soule, he had the foresight and and that's also just Giuseppe Camuncoli blocking out the scene as well, and the way you said it's performed, it's acted, because Camuncoli is also a master of figuring out where the character is moving, and so yeah, it definitely I mean I should read it again and then watch Revenge of the Sith and envision that scene a lot differently and say this is what happens next. Again, it's the funny, goofy, not goofy, but the relationship between screen and paper. How we were saying just before off camera, what's the relationship between screen and paper, and how are comics going to influence paper, or influence screen, rather, screen stories? We don't know, and that's the answer, is we don't actually know. They might, and they always do. Maybe one thing I'm curious about this Kenobi adaptation: do they reference things we saw in the Gillen comic? Because they clearly the Anakin versus Vader, we saw that first in the Gillen comic. I get to another thing we saw first in this comic that we see later on. But yeah, it's my last point is I'm grateful that Charles Soule had the foresight to do it, had the permission to do it, and because it really sets up everything. It sets up the tone for this comic, sets up going back to the beginning of the Gillen and Jason Aaron crossover moment. That's set decades later. The whole finally Vader is able to really start to oppose Palpatine. Everything we're seeing in the Greg Pak comic now, where he's definitely, I mean, Anakin is coming back and actually turning on his master, and ultimately going to defeat his master, but not as Darth Vader, but as Anakin. This is kind of the bookend of it the other way.
Yeah, I'll push back a little bit about are the films the God perspective? I mean, if
I don't necessarily mean that, but
it's like it's just the George Lucas perspective.
Yeah.
As the director.
But that's kind of maybe what I was getting at before, right? Is
there a God?
Goofy? I mean, I just meant in terms of what is the most true moment, and I guess we could say we don't know. Like, it's true in different ways from certain points of view.
I mean, I feel like about just everything about Star Wars to a certain extent. Like, I don't think there is an objective God, third, present, omnipotent thing in Star Wars.
The content is the audience.
Exactly. But no, I really do like the scene of the reinterpretation of the no moment as well, and very much this is fits into Vader's character a lot. This is very much early day. This is Vader day one, where he is kind of mad a lot more. He's very much erratic. He's just woke up, his body's been burned. I don't think I would be happy too. Wife's dead. No hope, no future. Just old crusty Palpatine as your friend zapping you.
Friend.
Dear friend. But yeah, and Vader trying to learn how to be a Sith because He's only been a Sith for like a day. Your first day on the job and you screwed up. Uh, yeah, but it certainly gets into the character a lot, and that's it is sort of interesting, kind of seeing the dichotomy. This is why I think ultimately, Gillen and Charles Soule's run, I do think work hand in hand, because this is like Gillen's run is very much Vader 20 years into the job. He's the cold, calculating tool of the Emperor. And we'll hopefully see that in a couple of weeks when we do another comic. Hint for the future, maybe. But here he is very much more erratic. He's kind of losing a little bit of the cold, calculated nature. It's very much in the moment kind of feel still. And it's very much he is. I mean, I guess it's let's get into something of question of what is a Sith. Well, you are a Sith, he says. Because ultimately, Sith are about their anger and their rage and let the hate flow through you, yada yada, all that good stuff. But and this gets into, and then this is aptly talked about a little bit more in the next issue and the next volume. I'm going to talk about here, where there's a difference between all of that and what Vader's kind of doing, where he's a rabid animal going, I mean, he doesn't do, but he kind of does it a little bit. Where, most of the prime Sith Lords in their life, they're anger and they got their ego, but they're also, they're calculating tacticians, or, like the Emperor, very much more of the calculating person, who very much, patience, kind of weird thing, Palpatine, all about letting the hate flow through you. It's like, probably one of the most patient people in the galaxy.
Yeah,
like
most patient. Yeah,
Yoda, him can probably have a patient off. Like, who can out patient?
I mean, they kind of do in Revenge of the Sith. Like,
yeah, but I mean, just in terms of like Palpatine's whole plan takes 30, 50 years to enact. It's like he's waiting around.
1,000 years. Takes a millennium.
I mean, Palpatine was alive, then hopefully.
But you know what I mean? Right?
Yeah, but he's like.
Patience being a Sith thing in its own way.
Wait in the shadows. It's kind of interesting. Like, let your hate flow through you. And you could always argue maybe this is just what the Bane Siths are doing, and maybe the Siths of old are different. But even then, I gotta imagine that the warlord Siths probably still gotta have some tactical strategicness to them. Either way. But yeah, I guess. Vader is learning to be a Sith. Right now, he is just a raw rage Frankenstein monster. But here's the thing about the Frankenstein monster, especially if you know the novel, not the movie. The Frankenstein monster in the book is actually really smart and kind of scary, and he is normal human smart. Like, he's not. He is not. That's the movie. The book actually, like, oh no, he's kind of a calculating. Vengeful creature like his master and creator, and that's ultimately kind of in a weird way. Maybe I don't know if Charles Soule read the classic Frankenstein novel.
I'm sure he did. I'm sure that was an influence.
But
I'm sure it was for George Lucas too.
Vader, obviously, I think Vader. I mean, Lucas. Vader originally was going to be like this when he in Revenge of the Sith, when he was on the plate with his hands up and they chased down. But the point is, Vader starts off as grrr. I'm kind of kidding, but by the end, he does become more that cold, calculating. It's not just I'm killing people because I'm mad. Like, Vader's like a lot more calculated. Like, I'm gonna really just. So so I'll pass it to you in terms of dealing with the Sith of it all.
This was such a really unique look at Vader. I really loved how different this was, because to sum up everything you're saying, with everything in the films and everything in the Gillen run and in the Pac run, Vader's in control. He knows what's happening. I mean, even the scene in Rogue One where it's like there's no accident, there's no Death Star, there's no accident. He just knows what he needs to do. He knows what's happening. Him and Palpatine, they don't have to talk much in order for them to be, on the same page in terms of what the other's thinking, in terms of what Vader has to do for the Empire. And that is the thing. He is in control. And at the beginning here, and then of course at the end, he's not in control. He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know what this whole Sith thing is. He asks questions, and he has to ask questions, about, getting, especially we'll talk about the Inquisitors in a bit. It's like, what's happening? You sent them to kill me, and Palpatine has to respond. Would he have been successful? No. Okay, there we go. I figure it out. But yeah, it gives this other shade to him that then puts in relief and in contrast what he has to actually build up to in order to be so fully calculated and in control. We've seen Empire Strikes Back, right, with the ships coming in too hot, and he's like, no, I didn't want you to do that. I want you to stop stop sooner. And he's able to, he knows that was the problem. And just very, very direct and to the point. Here he's kind of rickety. He's kind of, what's happening? What do I do? What's going on? Because we know that there's still this 22, 23-year-old kid in there who's just trying to figure and make his way to the galaxy. Is a little bit emotionally unhinged because, in my point of view, the Jedi are evil and all that. That's still in there, and that comes through. Like you were talking about with that series, seeing through the mask to see Anakin, what Hayden himself talked about, right? You start with Anakin and you just keep going in the dark place.
In that series, Vader is, we see a little bit more Vader, kind of more of an emotional Vader, kind of making mistakes and not in full.
And that's that's halfway through. And so this, he needs to go through. He needs to, come get used to. Well, he needs to go through what he goes through in this arc first off. Which we'll get to very soon. But he also needs to, go through building the castle and having to give up on Padme, and with the castle just failing and seeing her falling, and not falling, just letting go and saying, "You gotta let me go." He has to go through 20 years of being Sidious's right-hand man, but under his thumb. He has to go through learning that he has a son and that Palpatine lied to him this whole time. He has to go through all that. He has to go through meeting Luke, and then that has to become, that has to become the, no pun intended, that has to become the fulcrum of his story. And so all that, and it parallels the rise of the Empire, right? The Empire has to come to a point where they have Star Destroyers everywhere. They have the Death Star. They're in total control of the galaxy. They're not fully in control yet here. There are Jedi running around. There's Saw Gerrera and all of these other rebel cells running around. They have to send this Inquisitorius out to handle all this. Until 20 years later, there is some sort of semblance of peace. It's Pax Americana, it's Pax Romana, right? It's
a Death Star.
It's a Death Star. It's called the Death Star. And it's the Empire at their height. And then Luke comes along, the son of Padme comes along. And this encounter on the Death Star, flying through the trench, is what changes everything. And so, and then of course, going back to the end of the story, Return of the Jedi, which I'm very curious to get to see how Greg Pak handles this, and he's starting to handle it pretty clearly, pretty well. The undoing of Vader, in favor of Anakin, in favor of a more compassionate, someone who is compassionate and caring and loving, and is willing to sacrifice himself, choosing weakness, right? It's amazing. It is astounding that Charles Soule just thought through all of this and plotted through all of this, and is able to depict it. Maybe I'm interpreting here, I'm reading some things in here, but saying, okay, just the way Rian Johnson was able to spin this out. Why is Luke on this island? What is Rey? What would Rey fear the most and hate the most? Right, spinning those things out to then say, what's the most difficult thing? What is Vader's challenge right now? Where is he most likely to be at? And it isn't the character we have of him. It isn't the again, always in control, always the boss. He has shades of it. He has hints of it, especially when he's confronting Keurig. But in some points, at some points, but especially when he's dealing with other Imperials. But yeah, that's him kind of tapping in also to Anakin's brashness as well. And that's another thing is, maybe this is just this fascinating thing to think about is, Vader being in control, the only way he's able to do that is by tapping to Anakin's sense of control over everything, that his ability to joke on the battlefield, right? That that he again takes in this dark direction. Here everything's so shaky and so unsure, and it's really he's not the best employee. He's not the most talented or skilled or what. Oh, he's the most talented and skilled, but it's raw also, and not the best foundation. And so what if the Inquisitor comes in, and we'll get to that later, but these tests that Palpatine keeps sending him throughout this comic and throughout even the Greg Pak comic, but especially this one, really, they're all very make or break, in that they could break him, but they end up making him. I mean, the monster by monster, I mean, the word monster means one who demonstrates. The word monster and demonstrator are the same word, actually.
Learning a little something about language.
They reveal, they show something dark and evil about ourselves, and that dark and evil thing isn't the worst thing in the world. Isn't someone who's unhinged and flailing about. The worst thing in the world is someone who knows exactly what they're doing, and knows it's wrong and doesn't care, and knows that other people will think it's wrong, and society will think it's wrong, and doesn't care. And that's what Vader ends up getting to, or attempting to, until he encounters Luke.
I mean, Vader in a lot of ways in this book, and I think again, I think there's something. I get the first and second volume kind of mixed in my brain a little bit, but they're gonna go hand in hand. So is obviously there's almost. I mean, no, there's not almost. There is a nihilism to Vader, kind of like thinking about everything. Kind of leap to the very end. When Vader had a chance to says a thought of maybe I should find Kenobi and repent. And but then he goes no, there is nothing else. This is all that there is. The world does not matter. I don't. Heck, it's sort of even sad where it's it's sad in a certain sense, because no one should be like this. It's sort of interesting that selfishness is sort of another thing for sure. But Vader, especially kind of early on, and even through a good chunk right up until he meets Luke, that's where I feel like he starts getting a little bit of that selfishness back. He's very much a self-loathing. If I die, okay, but I'm gonna just take everything down with me. There's a self-loathing nihilism. Nothing matters. I don't matter. The universe doesn't matter. I have to live in this just pit of just even the whole overthrow the Emperor thing. That doesn't really come into effect until after he meets Luke, and he's there's this weird kind of twisted spark of maybe there's something to this world. There's this bond I can have with my son. Obviously, it's still a twisted one of, hey, let's take over the Empire. We can be all powerful and stuff. What I could have had with Padme, and that didn't matter, because obviously right now Vader only has Palpatine. He has no one. Right. So that's where
he doesn't have Ahsoka.
And have Ahsoka even. Well, even when he finds out Ahsoka's alive, he kind of still doesn't really snap out of that thought, which is it's interesting thing to kind of think about. It's it's you didn't even bother to give Ahsoka the, hey, join me, we can rule the galaxy as this mastered apprentice. Kind of interesting just thought, weirdly enough. But I mean, obviously Ahsoka would have said no, but still, it's kind of interesting. He puts in the effort.
I mean, Maul gives her that in the Clone Wars finale, right? That's
that's Maul, but I'm talking about Vader. Anakin doesn't even bother with Ahsoka. He doesn't even try. He's he goes.
I will say though, and this gets it. I was thinking, and Again, we'll talk about this later, but
Mhm.
um, yeah, I mean, I forgot it's another crack in the armor, right? I mean, of
Right.
course, Ahsoka gets a crack, Kenobi gets a crack, Sabi gets a crack, Keurig gets a crack, right? You see the. I mean, you only see it on the cover, so that's a little different, but I mean, that's evocative again of how he's it's just your day one. He's not, I mean, and he's not all put together, and how he has to, he's he gets all mangled and destroyed, and he has to find the remnants of these droids and put them together that way. But he's just, I mean, that is more the flailing monster type of thing with the cape is all tattered. And yeah, I mean, great job by just Epic Captain Cody again for depicting that so brilliantly, so uniquely, so different from what we had seen before, and from what we've seen since. And yeah, Vader day one, not all together, not all. I mean, scary in the sense of
He can
we don't.
kill you.
Yeah, he's gonna and does a very Sith thing of the destroys the dam and destroys that city. But yeah,
But yeah, but like yeah, but it's sort of interesting. Like there is that nihilistic kind of
that's what I
darkness.
wonder. When is it? So there's a difference I think between nihilism and self-loathing. Like at least self-loathing, there's an opinion. There's at least a passion. Because I mean it's the way saying hate and love aren't opposites. It's hate and apathy, love and apathy. I don't know. I mean, I wonder. Maybe there's a mix of the two, and the two are warning each other that nothing matters, that only I matter, only the dark side matters. Uh,
Well,
yeah,
there's got to be some self. There's definitely self-loathing because I do
yeah.
think.
So that's like the self-loathing is saying the dark side matters,
Mhm.
and that I've given in to everything I swore I wouldn't, and I caused Padme's death. And so, what do I do now? Um, I'm just saying nihilism is like you have to, in order for to hate something, to loathe something, it has to matter enough, is what I'm saying. And so I think that might be more of it for Vader, and that's why there's the hope, right? That's why there's still something in there that he's constantly pushing against. We saw at the end of the Gillen comic, he's pushing against, he's literally dueling, Anakin's dueling Vader on Mustafar there in that vision. And uh it's Kenobi's influence at the end of this comic book thing, pushing against and constantly pushing against it. And here he's pushing against it rather feebly, and we'll get just in a short sec to just how feeble it could be.
Yeah. So that's very much Vader's character. We'll go into that a bit more. But also you mentioned this isn't just Vader day one. This is Empire day one, and
Mhm.
boy, do they quickly want to. They quickly want to just establish the Empire, right? Like it's like, nope,
Yeah,
Jedi Temple, nope, that's the Imperial Palace now. Let's just get the banners on.
the spirit of Halloween.
Exactly. The spirit of Halloween.
Yeah, and
Every
that's where you first see that, right? That's the first like they didn't Legends didn't do that, right? They didn't have like the Imperial Palace wasn't the Jedi Temple or
no, I first
no.
appears in Tarkin. That's
Yeah,
when it first kind of mentioned with the Imperial Palace.
right.
Legends, for the most part, had the Imperial Palace be a separate thing. Although the
Yeah,
Imperial Palace appears in the '90s, when I don't think there was even the concept of a Jedi Temple.
true. Yeah.
Um, you see, I think the Jedi Temple in the 1990 special edition of Return of the Jedi, although I don't know if that was ever classified as the Imperial Palace
Right.
or
I mean,
the
there's the
temple.
statue of Palpatine right in front of it that gets toppled down.
So it's certainly something that's sort of like, I don't know. I do wonder if this is something that
Mm,
George would have gotten done if he had done that Underworld show, where it's like, yeah, the Jedi
yeah.
Temple becomes the Imperial Palace, and that was always, at least in his head, what
Mhm.
the Palpatine's residence would be after Revenge of the Sith. It's just
Yeah.
that Legends got to Coruscant first, and the Imperial Palace is a whole different building.
I mean, the concept works perfectly. I mean, I
Oh
love
yeah,
it. I love that they went there. We're gonna stamp out their light by taking over their home. Yeah, I mean, and say about their light by chucking the lightsabers into the kiln, right? You have lots of men doing that. So
that must be right.
yeah,
Fake Pets somebody else. Yeah, that fake Pets just essentially giving the big speech like, yeah, we're done. We're public sucked, just sucked. Time for the to burn all these darn lightsabers to the big crowd.
Yeah, big traitor. Yeah. Well, the whole thing. I'm gonna get into this.
Okay.
Charles Soule. So here's this funny thing. So so it was one of his lightsabers. Funny story. I think there's a later comic set later involving Yoda, written by Charles Soule. I forget what it is. And like anticipating all the discourse, or no, it might have been Mandalorian, right? I think that's what it was, right? Because you have
Book of Boba Fett.
There's Book of Boba, whatever. I merged the two. I stick the two together. Book of Boba Fett. Fine.
Yeah, pretty much at this point. Yeah.
Fine. Mandalorian season 1.5, whatever it was, 2.5, whatever it was. Anyway, anticipating somehow, probably not, but who knows how. I mean, the discourse coming up. How could this be Yoda's lightsaber? Charles Soule's comic, we saw it burned. In an issue of a comic book that came out, I think might have been the Star Wars Ongoing by Charles Soule in 2020. There's an explicit panel that says, "Oh yeah, he had multiple lightsabers." And that could have had to have been in development concurrently. Who knows? But that was one of the perfect things. So yeah, I mean, he has the same in the High Republic. He has the same lightsaber. It's got to be a different one. I mean, I don't know how long those things last. So it's one of them, but not all. He had more. He can make more. It's not that hard. He could have made more.
Anakin had 2 technically.
Yeah, and yeah, could have made more. And I mean, obviously, by the time he's on Dagobah, he has none. He's completely disavowed it and wouldn't make another one. But yeah, who's to say he didn't make more? I mean, Charles Soule says he did. So there we go. Speaking of Kyber, do you want to talk about Kyber?
Kyber. Ooh, Kyber. It's Rogue One reference. Yeah. So Kyber crystals, yeah, those come back in a big way. This continues the Kyber crystal bleeding idea, which you say was
from what I know, it was introduced in E.K. Johnson's Ahsoka novel.
Yeah, it was introduced, but was it her idea?
We have no idea. I think it might have been actually. It might have been just a way for her to get like, I mean, she tells the story. Like, she tells the story. Ahsoka gets her lightsabers back, or not her lightsabers back. She gets her lightsaber from an Inquisitor, and she defeats an Inquisitor and takes the crystal and unbleeds it. And so that's where this story of this idea of how Kyber crystals are not synthetic, they're bled, and that gets expanded on in this comic.
Oh no, I know that, but it's like, is she getting that note from Dave?
We don't know. I think something in my noggin saying she thought that up and she pitched it to the story group, but I'll have to dig around and find out. But I think it might have been hers, because I mean, it's such a great concept too. Another great concept of how the Sith, the dark side, it doesn't, the light side exists for the preservation of life. And in this arc, in these comics, Palpatine says, the Kybers, they're alive. They're not necessarily a conscience or a sentience, but they're part of the galaxy that connects to the Force for the sake of the flourishing of life. And they're very much a very vibrant, active part of the way the galaxy and creation, I can use the term, just the physical existence connects to the Force. And so the dark side is a great, wonderful way of expressing, very poetic, not wonderful in a fun way, but a very evocative way of expressing the way the dark side stamps out life and tries to make life suffer for the sake of suffering. Very moment, which we're going to see, which we'd see later in this comic. But very much just everything that the Sith are about. Plagueis saying I'm going to manipulate life in order to preserve my own power.
Make your
similar
kyber
idea,
crystal
right?
feel
And so
pain. It's so
yeah,
edgy.
so to see it. So
I love
anyway,
it.
go ahead.
I know, I love it. It's like so edgy. I love it. It's like
Mhm.
it's you take this cyber crystal that's alive and like you're gonna make it feel just constant pain all
Yeah.
the time because you're right, not sentient, but they're kind of sentient. They feel things. You can kind of
Well, clearly, I mean, animals feel things. I mean, we know
right.
plants feel things a little bit. I mean, definitely know animals feel things. The animals have rights. I mean,
Yeah.
you for that reason. Yeah, they react, they respond,
Hmm.
and they respond to good, and they respond to evil, they respond to life, and they respond to death. And so, in that way, there is a type of life in them.
It does make me wonder though, like where do some of the Sith get their lightsabers from now though? Because like I wonder where did Palpatine get his lightsaber from? Who did he kill?
Yeah,
Did he take it from someone? Did he what's his where his lightsabers come from? He has two.
right.
At least in Clone Wars he has two. He had one and just runs the Sith. Um Sometimes he has two still.
Mhm.
Surprised he didn't take Yoda's and just bleed it. Like, why destroy it? If I were Palpatine, take Yoda's lightsaber and bleed it, like just for the cruel irony.
Well, I think he. I mean, he wanted the visual. He wanted the Masamune visual of
Like,
Grandmaster. See ya.
yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, yeah, Vader's got the lightsaber. It's like my lightsaber was destroyed. Like, no, that's Anakin's lightsaber. Again, adding to the whole,
Mhm.
Palpatine's trying to almost separate that Anakin and Vader are two people kind of situation. It's like
And purging the legacy of Anakin, trying to get him to forget this
right.
weakness, right?
Yeah. Um, it also makes me wonder though, like I do kind of wonder, like from the Empire's perspective, just kind of like and that kind of gets me into a situation of like from the Empire's perspective in like the propaganda. Is Anakin also just another Jedi who got purged in the purge? Like, oh, he's just another traitor, or it's like, are there like propaganda books that say, out of all the Jedi, Anakin Skywalker though was the one who
Hmm.
stood by the Chancellor, but nobly perished by his fellow Jedi's hands. Um,
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean,
that'll be a,
my instant answer is to say, if he hadn't gotten barbecued, and if he hadn't, I mean, we know it's Sheev Palpatine. It's not Darth Sidious. His name is well known. I mean, although he puts on the Uncle Sheev propaganda image, but throughout we see that in Bad Batch. We see that in Rebels, right? The end of Rebels. If it was
I
so
didn't do
very
that in Bad Batch.
clearly,
Because he still kind of appears all scarred. It's only Rebels where he does
oh yeah,
that.
maybe it's Rebels. Yeah, yeah, it's true. But in Lost Stars, I think they mentioned that Sienna Ray is like Sienna's like, oh, this is what he actually looks like by the Return of the Jedi, as opposed to the Grandpa Uncle Palpy. If Vader hadn't gotten barbecued, people would have said, yeah, obviously that's Anakin Skywalker. We've seen him on the Hollows and all the Republic propaganda. They wouldn't have been able to hide it, and that's the I mean that's the poetic thing about the armor. And even in this arc, it's exemplified in the way the armor uh is shaky and rickety and weird, and has to at the end he has to actually create the armor to his liking. Probably still keeps the pain, keeps the discomfort there, but has to make it more all together and put together, and of course has to use the force to do it, and manipulating the life of the droid parts. I don't know, but yeah, I do want to go back to the this whole Kyber idea, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, again, it's any kind of way, just so Jedi Fallen Order or Jedi Survivor with the creamsicle lightsabers. Interestingly, one list thought about Jedi with the Jedi Temple. That's also we see that in Jedi Survivor and seeing that through Cal Kestis' eyes. That was really poignant. Yeah, just seeing any kind of weird light graphic thing with the temple lights coming on and everything. That would have been cool. That would have been fun. But instead, we get a vision. We get a vision of, well, first of all, uh, the blue eyes come back, right? very poignantly. I mean, that's probably why we have the crack in the mask. So we can see the blue eyes come back. We have that vision that you mentioned before of Anakin going back to the Imperial Palace, defeating Sidious, going back to Obi-Wan, and repenting, and that's the thing that that's the thing, that's the test he has to face, and him saying no and rejecting that is what bleeds the crystal, is what he's able to channel his hate and his power. It isn't some instrumentalized science fiction-y thing. It's a character story. It's his personal motivations. It's his grief and his loss. I mean, we see the panels about Shmi and Padme. It's everything he experienced in the Clone Wars. I think we see Ahsoka in that panel too. All of that's what gets poured into the crystal. And that's how, I mean, here's the thing is, for Jedi, for light users, the crystal bonds to the user and becomes, finds out the user, the Illimark. The crystal finds the Padawan, finds the youngling. Again, in Jedi Fallen Order, the crystal finds Cal, calls to Cal. And that, that's the only way to actually defeat that or finish that mission is by getting enough to where the crystal, and you're guided through. In this, the Kyber is forced to bond for the dark side. The Kyber is forced to bond to not just some powerful being, but that being's story, and but that being's reason for falling to the dark side and for choosing the dark side, and is forcibly bound to that, just the way a crystal is bound to a Jedi's service to the light. And yeah, it's so perfectly done. It's so shocking because you're in it. It's like, what's happening? What am I seeing here? What is going on? Is he's going defeats Palpatine and then goes and actually turns to Obi-Wan? When did this happen? How did this happen? What are the implications of that going forward? And then
I checked, by the way, there is no Ahsoka in that scene.
Okay, fair enough. But I must have inserted it because her leaving is such a part of that story too, right? I must have just I don't know what inserted in my own mind. Yeah, it speaks to how next level this comic book is and this arc is, and again talking about what Vader has to definitively do in order to get to that place of being someone in control, and in control of squelching the memory of Anakin or keeping it at bay until he can't anymore. And the only one who can is, that's another thing is if Padme were there, if Padme hadn't died, he probably would have come back eventually.
You think so? I don't know.
Well, here's why I think that, and this is interesting. Here's why I think that. Mm-hmm. Again, I mean, we say this multiple times in this episode, right? Mm-hmm. She had to die, or not had to. It's tragic, and she got fridged, but she would have been able to appeal to her actually being there in the flesh. Would have been able to appeal to who Anakin is, because Anakin is so tied into who she is, and she's so tied into who he is. This is why I think that is, because that's why the son of Padme is the only one to turn him back in the flesh, not just a vision, not just a specter, whatever, not just his apprentice that the Order foisted on him, that he grew to love as a little sister. That's true, but the actual son of Padme in the flesh, being writhing on the floor because of the Sith, and everything that Anakin Vader did to Padme, Palpatine is doing to Luke, and so has to be where the moment he returns. But again, going back to this beginning here, it was so poetically done. And then
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You always bring up the son of Padme. What about the daughter of Padme, Leia? I think you're kind of doing some Leia.
Yeah, I mean, well, what I'm...
I think Leia would have
fought Vader and killed him. The Jedi, right? The confrontation there. I mean, yeah, I mean, one of the things I remember constantly from my childhood is sister. So you have a twin sister. Yeah, I mean, there's got to be something there too.
I mean, I
Sure.
personally am of the opinion that if Leia had fought Vader, like, nah, she'd just kill him. She would have gone for it. She would have done the warrior
Maybe, and
route.
that's maybe why Luke had to be there. I mean, we talk about a lot about how, you know, Leia is. I mean, and I'm starting to see it now, and even right now, I'm starting to see. Okay, yeah, Leia is Anakin's daughter. Luke is Padme's son,
Oh
and
yeah,
how,
that's very much your
you
intention.
know, and so yeah, that's what I'm getting at. I mean, not to downplay Leia's role in anything. It's just that's what we have in Return of the Jedi. But to say, I mean, it's the presence of Padme, the enduring presence of Padme, that is necessary for Anakin to return. Anyway, I mean, that's the vision that he has is with Obi-Wan.
Although I'll say
Ultimately, so I just want
the
to say, the vision that Vader has in that cave in Mustafar with the crystal, it's Obi-Wan, who, I mean, Anakin felt, the greatest betrayal. You're my brother, Anakin. I hate you. That everything embodies everything that he hates about the Jedi Order and about his upbringing, because this is the one he was closest to. And even if Obi-Wan isn't necessarily directly responsible for everything, he projects everything onto him. So yeah, rejecting Obi-Wan, projecting everything onto the crystal, it's so poignant, and it gets at everything that Charles was saying about this character, gets at everything about who Vader is in relation to Anakin. One last point I'll say here: brilliant bit of storytelling. The cool moment. We don't. Yeah, I mean, maybe Jedi Fallen Order Survivor kind of got us getting used to this. Obviously, he would have built a lightsaber and he would have tested it out, but we don't get to see that. We only see that at the end when he's in the palace, and he reveals the red lightsaber in front of Palpatine, to Palpatine and to us. It's this delayed gratification to say he's fully in now. He's fully on board. He's now committed to the way of the Sith, as best he can at this point. Still day one, still year one, but yeah.
probably
Anyway,
week
that's
one.
all I have. That's all I gotta say about that.
Probably
Dive
week
in.
one. Shoot, I had a lot to say. Now I gotta think about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we can only do so many what ifs of like if Padme lived or what.
sure.
Like, I mean, heck, George had an olden idea of like, nah, Padme's gonna go there, just kill Anakin, dagger to the back, man.
Who was
Classic.
that? Who's the guy who did the concept art for the High Republic? He was saying that he drew Ian McKeag. He drew the concept art for that.
Yeah, man, classic Greek tragedy.
Yeah.
Also, think about Leia. I mean, Leia got to have her moment, obviously, with her son, who, I think, kind of Leia calling out to Ben kind of was his snap out of it moment for sure. Not poignant, obviously, but that's that's what I always took from Rise of Skywalker for certainly.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say Leia's all warrior, for certainly. But yeah, the moment with, we're kind of going all over the place. For the moment of like making the crystals, like it is really a cool
Yeah.
moment where first you get the vision, and then Vader like this is all there is, and just every time he's like doing the putting all that anger, it's like the mountains are roaring in
Yeah.
the
It's
plains.
apocalyptic.
And then he goes back to Coruscant. I guess we can move on. And honestly, here's kind of my controversial take. Kind of my least favorite part of the comic is the actual person he fights.
Yeah.
To be quite honest, it's not like bad or anything. I just feel like there is some deflatedness of like, oh, Vader gets his lightsaber from just random character who you can just die because if you can't use an old character because obviously, uh, we know what's gonna happen, or we're gonna have a new character just to die. And obviously Vader needs to get the lightsaber from. One of those things where you're like, yeah, there's some cool ideas for sure about the Baruch Vow, and we can definitely talk about it. But like, I don't know, something about it just always kind of like this is like the least interesting part, where everything else is like the super beginning and like the very end it's like that's where like all the cool Vader deep character stuff is, and then the actual battle's like, oh yeah, Vader's gotta kind of figure it out, and he fails a couple times, and it's always good to see Vader just kind of constantly get beat. Which is kind of par for the course. Vader with like he wins, but he's always getting like thrown around and ragdolled, like but it's like it's like this is sort of like it's like this is just a character who's going to die. Yeah, they're gonna come back later in a High Republic comic, and that's cool. Expand on them. It's like as of now, it's like just this comic's like you're the character who's here to serve a plot purpose, and that is to serve Anakin's plot purpose, which it's fine. It's just you're kind of here to die, ultimately, and show us some cool Force stuff too along the way, but
yeah. I mean, I see what you're saying. I see what you mean. It's introduced a character to kill them off. It's the most familiar, right? It's the most we're used to Vader going kicking tar, doing a very Sith thing of just killing a bunch of innocent civilians in the city just because they had a Jedi there. It's the most we've seen, most similar to what we've seen. Again, I've got a few things, right? It's still shaky. He's still he's this arrogant upstart who doesn't know. Okay, there's this master who's taken all this time. Who we learn? Well, no, we learn in that comic, right? That his own that, or did we just learn a few weeks ago that his only role is to kill? I forget where my brain is because we just read it. But
wait. Oh, are we talking about the Jedi or the?
We're talking about Barash. We're talking about Kirak in Phila.
Oh, I don't remember anymore. I don't remember.
Yeah, the Kirak in Phila, his only role was to kill, and so he's removed himself. And this idea of being, I mean, because the Jedi, I mean, they're more called Cenobitic, as in they have communities. They're out in society. They're the guardians of peace and justice. Here's this hermit, an actual hermit, taking a vow of eremitic hermit monasticism because of in atonement for all the violence and evil that he's done. So I mean, I think it's really a really fascinating concept to introduce.
Oh yeah,
into Star Wars, and this really in this fascinating kind of what's the word? Counterpoint to Vader, who's about to do all these atrocities and has done all the atrocities in the Jedi Temple, right? Who should take a Barash vow, and maybe that would be how Anakin and Kylo Ren and Ben Solo would atone, is by taking the Barash vow, potentially. It's I mean, we're glad we're going to see this more. We've met Barash now in a comic by Charles Soule. We've met Porter Engle, who takes the vow for a little bit. We're going to meet Kirak Infala in Phase 3 and see just what he did. And I'm very curious to see if it is kind of Vader-esque in that kind of towing the line, believing you're doing the right thing, maybe taking out a whole bunch of Nihil, taking out a town or whatnot. I mean, with Barash, it was being sucked into the courtly politics of these towns, these villages, and causing all this bloodshed, or being responsible for all these for the mercenaries attacking. So this is High Republic Phase 2, but the origins of the Barash vow. Yeah, the idea of the Jedi, questioning whether or not the Jedi can actually always do good, and to do good at the end of a lightsaber. And again, it's that extreme counterpoint where we have this story of Vader getting his red lightsaber that he's going to do all these atrocities with Kirak's crystal, and it is this very deep, tragic, sad thing.
I guess
is that it's this master who's vowed now to not interfere, not intervene. His crystal gets taken from him. He's the one whose his crystal gets taken from. That then goes in for 20 years, commits all these atrocities. Now, one last interesting thing I always found fascinating is it's yet another thing that Vader has to draw on that Anakin would know, being a Jedi Knight, he would know what the Barrage Vow is, right? He just know, and he'd know to go to that outpost and go to do the research. Yeah, it just, oh yeah, just the remembering, recollecting. Yeah, he would know these things. Again, it's interesting. It comes again before. Obviously, it has to come before the crystal's bled, but yeah, I mean that's all these things in this arc are, the vision with the crystal destroying the town, even taking hold of the Inquisitorius, uh setting out, even feeling the lightning from Darth Sidious at the beginning. All these things moving Vader away from the aims of the Jedi and the aims of the Barrage Vow. And so it's this interesting counterpoint. Anyway, that's, yeah, go ahead.
I like that, but at the same time, I feel like the crystal. I feel like we forget. Maybe I haven't read the rest of the comic in a while, so I'm gonna have to like really remember how this actually ended.
Mhm.
So I could be proven wrong in a couple weeks if we ever do the
Yeah.
rest, which we probably
Anyway,
are.
go ahead.
But I just don't feel like. I feel like the character's kind of forgotten after he's sort of done with. Like, okay, we got the crystal. Great, now let's bleed it.
Yeah, they could have done something in the rest of the comic. They could have.
And I feel
A
like
little
kind
bit.
of the weight of that idea, which is a good idea. I
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I like that idea. I like that idea of like a pacifist, complete violent, someone who's just done with violence. Crystal is now going to be used for 20 something years to be the violence
Yeah.
of. I just feel like we've never, well, the rest of the comic doesn't really deal with that anymore. It's just kind of like it's a thing, and then we
No.
move on. It doesn't really kind of preclude to the whole series. Um, so I feel like that's kind of the weight of it, kind of just is not there throughout the rest of the story, and you're just kind of like, okay, he did his thing. Now we move on to the next arc. With some Jocasta new.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I see what you're saying. I think Jocasta is another example of someone. I mean, yeah, she's doing something active by getting the library together, getting that list of Force sensitives together, but she's being more contemplative. So, I mean, I get it. It's such a cool idea, such a cool character. You want more to do. You want him to have more to do, but
it's certainly something I hope.
I'm satisfied with what I got.
It's certainly something I hope Soul picks up on if like Luke ever
Well, he
finds.
is. I mean, that's just it, right?
No. I mean, in the future, like if like Luke finds Vader's old kyber crystal, it's like, oh, dang.
Yeah.
Like obviously the Jedi's dead, but like maybe Luke can like help out with this one too.
That's interesting. I mean, I wonder if he thought of that. Because again,
unless,
he's returned to Kirak and to Barash and Porter.
unless the lightsaber just has exploded. I mean, I don't know what happened to Vader's lightsaber. That's a good question. What happened to Vader's lightsaber?
I mean, didn't the acolytes of the Beyond get a hold of it?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, is that
They did it
actually
after
Vader's?
that.
I mean, is that
Yeah.
actually Vader's lightsaber? I don't remember anymore.
Yeah, I think something like that.
But that was certainly something like like maybe eventually Luke does get a hold of it or something.
If Charles Soule's writing the story, I think he.
Oh
Might,
yeah, that would
maybe.
That certainly be something. But yeah, that's just sort of that's
Yeah.
like the one critique about the first arc in general is like really strong beginning with all the Vader, Emperor episode 3 stuff. A really strong end. To me, it's just the middle part that kind of like, this is like the weakest part for me. Like, yeah. I mean, I like the
It's most
ideas.
familiar.
It's
And
most
if you're
familiar.
given such new, interesting stuff, this is the most familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably like the most kind of like, okay, this is just typical Vader, doing his thing. Cool visuals, cool art. I know the art before we get before we get to the final few points. I just want to talk about the art. Art's beautiful. I love the
Yes.
art in this.
I mean, this art.
No complaints here. The art is lovely. I love the shading and the colors. It's got a very heightened look to it, which is really really good.
Like the River Moon of Aldolim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so that's very very good. So like after obviously Vader's all in, there is the volume which I kind of counted. So I'm counting this as part of the story.
Yeah.
Even though it's kind of setting up the next one. but we'll use it because it's technically in Volume 1, and that's where I decide.
It's still the introduction.
Is no one suspects the Grand Inquisitor because no one expected the Grand Inquisitor. Like, yeah, Grand Inquisitor shows up.
No one suspects the Sith Inquisition.
This is Inquisition. But yeah, it introduced the Grand Inquisitor, and
I mean, in comics.
In comics, yeah, and this is kind of expanding upon the stuff that was introduced in Rebels, and has been continued to be kind of refined and maybe not expanded upon, but just kind of reinforced. Especially with Rise of the Red Blade, which definitely takes a lot from the lore Souls
I need
run.
to read that. Shoot, I need to read that soon.
You should. It's really good. Because like all this, like this is where the Grand Inquisitor comes in. They lived in the Works in the Imperial Palace. Well, no, the Works is a different place. And Vader's obviously giving control of the Inquisitorius. I don't know if his cat is with them at the beginning. No, I don't think he is. She is. But yeah, it's sort of it's cool that Soule got to expand upon these guys when kind of because this was 2017. I think Rebel Season 3 was just starting. Yeah, Rebel Season 3 is already way it's
already done. Yeah.
It may have been done. Yeah, you're right. It might have been done.
I think so, but yeah.
And yeah, so the Inquisitorius was already ditched as villains at this point. So this was like our first real meaty return to these characters after Rebel kind of used them and then like okay, we're done. And obviously Jedi Fallen Order used them quite a lot, and then Kenobi. So kind of the first real expansion of the Inquisitorius outside of Rebels, and thank goodness, because I think it's good to see the concept just kind of expanded upon. Your thoughts on the great?
Yeah, sorry, your throws me or something. To see, by the time we see them in Rebels, they're not Vader's rival. Clearly, I mean, even Kenobi, they're all, who's gonna present Vader the good news, right? To get curry favor. In this first meeting, they don't know, like Vader and the Inquisitor, they don't know each other. They don't know who they are, who this other person is. All they know, they both have red lightsabers and are wandering around this room here. What are you doing here in these archives? Which is interesting. Just a side point. With the next person we see is Jocasta Nu, but so it's an interesting choice. But yeah, to see the backstory for the Inquisitor. I mean, we already knew he was a temple guard, but say his jealousy at not being able to access these books, and now Palpatine's promised him all this interesting access and power. How the temple guard are kind of these functionaries who don't have any sort of creative input in what the Jedi do, and that caused all this resentment in him. These former Jedi who, like Vader, they're Vader light. They have these attitudes against the Order. I mean, that beautiful, incredible moment with the blind Jedi who in the Mace Windu comic, I'm blanking on his name, who turns out later to be an Inquisitor. The way those resentments against the Jedi in the light side get perverted into serving the dark side, even though they're trying to be better servants of the light. In different ways, not necessarily, but yeah. And then to see them at first be rivals to Vader and think they're supposed to be rivals, and that's always this little bit of a through line that Palpatine always throws these potential rivals at him in order to see, okay, is he going to choose weakness? Is he going to choose maybe some compassion? Sorry, or is he going to actually lose and actually fail? And kind of the weeding it and finding a better apprentice. Or is he going to continue to prove himself and be tested as the worthy apprentice, the most useful apprentice, but of course ends up being the one who overthrows him, the Return of Anakin. Yeah, it's amazing just how quickly though, and I'm not knocking it, just showing us how much more powerful Vader is. How manipulative Palpatine is. What he ended up telling the Grand Inquisitor at first We serve the Emperor. No, you serve the Empire. Vader serves the Empire. Um, times have changed. We got to adapt, and and that's partly them covering their skin. Yeah, just going into these characters and the way this whole comic has these moments, like you mentioned with the other Inquisitor that spun a whole novel out now. Going into the Grand Inquisitor and where he comes from, knowing, of course, also how this Grand Inquisitor ends, or at least knowing how he ends in Rebels, but also kind of his fate being stuck in a wall. Vader sticks him in a wall. It's because it's always this kind of odd idea. Is it this sort of amendment to the rule of two, an addendum to the rule of two? Here we see, no, they're simply tools. They're simply weapons in the hands of the Sith. Just like they're just more lightsabers to swing around in a way, and to really, for Charles Soule to really explore, just what we see in Rebels, but what we don't see often is Vader with the Inquisitors. Here we do, and just to really establish and set this stage for them to be these assisting characters, kind of the way later on we'll see the Knights of Ren and Kylo Ren a little bit, but here it's more clearly connected to, well, they're connected to the Sith too, but clearly connected to the two Sith, Vader and Palpatine. Palpatine and Vader.
Yeah, that's sort of always sort of the thing of like, well, okay, you got the red lightsaber and you're doing some dark stuff, but like, are you assist? It's like, what makes you assist? You need to call. You need a business card. You need a secret handshake. Zippity zap, sissy zap. Obviously there's the Sith language, which kind of has sort of, do you get extra special tricks that only Sith know, but like you only know how to force choke someone because that's like basic 101. Anyone can do that, but like the Sith, we get to use the special things, whatever those are. But yeah, like Sith always have their minions and their acolytes and their assassins and whatnot. It's like they can't. Doesn't mean they can't just use force sensitives. Like, so the Inquisitorius is obviously, and again, read Rise of the Red Blade. Sort of it really is sort of the deepest look you're gonna get into this organization. Is it's like
And one thing I also want to see is, do you want to keep going? Sorry.
I'm just to say, it's about the Jedi. Every ex-Jedi who had some sort of qualm with the Jedi Order, some sort of like the greater good. Some are just probably were just always psychopaths and just like the Jedi never really suited them well. Grand Inquisitor, obviously an arrogant kind of jerk who just wanted to know stuff he probably thought was better than everyone else. Palpatine kind of just like, hey, Jedi didn't suck. Jedi suck, but you might not be able to help out. Go ahead.
Gaslighting. He's extreme gaslighter. I mean, again, bringing up this theme of Vader progressively getting in control, his ability to bring the Inquisitors under his heel and say, and Palpatine helps with that because he knows that's expedient. But bring under his heel, even again that dialogue I mentioned before, right? Vader asking questions. You sent him to kill me. What's going on here? And Palpatine saying, would he have succeeded? No. And that sense of confidence and control growing in Vader, his ability to keep them under his heel the whole time and not be rivals, not be anything but a mere tool in his hand, a mere weapon in his hand. And you're getting to work early and saying, I'll train them, and having that immediate devotion to the aims of the company line, towing the company line there. Vader being a better employee at the moment and saying, I'll get right to it, sir. And knowing he does a good job for the most part in honing them until, of course, they run into Kanan and Ezra and Kenobi and them. But it's it serves the character. It serves the growth of Vader as going from this shaky former Jedi, sort of what's happening, to Dark Lord of the Sith, in control, cold and calculating and able to send out his minis. It takes coordination, it takes logic, it takes strategy to use minions well. And so that's part of Vader's training too. And it was really important then for this story to include them right at the beginning as part of the intro. Again, everything it sets up later on.
Oh yeah, it's sort of they also kind of Inquisitors, while not large in number, and I think there's a reason for that because you don't want too many Force sensitive running around your empire.
Unlike in Legends, where they're all over, right?
I
think so.
Yes and no. It kind of depends.
Yeah.
Inquisitorius in Legends is a bit of a different thing.
Sure.
Although there were Force sensitives in there. This is a more streamlined version, but it is sort of like a more twisted version of the Jedi Order, and that's also something you'll read in Rise of the Red Blade, which is just my hint of read Rise of the Red Blade.
All right, I will.
It's so good. It's
I mean, phase 3 is coming up. I gotta finish phase 2, but anyway.
I mean, you read before phase 3, before it's too late. That's what I did. But yeah, it is sort of it does serve the seeing Vader kind of get more control and just sort of the Empire kind of continue to form. It is actually kind of interesting. Of like, I do kind of wonder though how much time has passed. Where, like obviously, I guess Palpatine had at least a list of candidates all ready to go, and then it's like, all right, you guys are going to form this new thing called the Inquisitorius. It's your new base in the works.
Well, it says he's had this thought for a while, right? This plan, knowing he's going to have, there's still going to be Jedi running around, that the Purge isn't going to be completely successful. And that Vader's going to need help. Whoever his Anakin apprentice is going to need help going and purging the Jedi. And that's another thing that Vader doesn't fully object to that, right? Just as long as, because Vader looks good if he's able to command the Inquisitorius to hunt down all the Jedi. And it's this thing in Rebels where it's like, oh, you couldn't do it. I have to go do it myself. Fine, I'll get involved. The people, if they're big enough potatoes, like in Kenobi as well. So yeah, no one expects the Sith Inquisition. Vader didn't expect it, but he rolls with it. He's able to roll with it.
He rolls with the punches, indeed. All right, so yeah, I'll just give our final thoughts on the comic. We've gone for a pretty good time, almost 2 hours. Yeah, overall, this is still pretty good. Again, I think my favorite of the Soule stuff kind of comes in the back half. First half, it's like that. It's like just judge the whole thing. I think the first half to me is a little weak, but the back half with the Mon Cala and especially Fortress Vader arcs are some of my favorite things. So definitely end on a high note for me. But this first arc is still really good overall. Dealing with Vader's, just the first minute of his life. Getting to see a different kind of interpretation of the no moment, the Grand Inquisitor, all that good stuff. I really do love the Inquisitor lore that this book expands upon, especially because that before then it's like there wasn't much that we were getting from Rebels because they were already all gone and dead. Right. But yeah, again, the weakest part for me is just the Vader getting the lightsaber, and I feel like not necessarily the getting the the actual getting the lights, the making of the lights of the kyber crystal is brilliant. Love it. But I feel like just the guy he gets it from and the meaning behind it kind of feels a little weightless because it just sort of feels dropped after a while. The kind of the tight the overarching cohesion could have been a little bit more overarching in that regard. But a great study to early day Vader. And kind of just him dealing with life and just kind of being kind of the non-controlled being that he is before we see more and more getting more in control. And don't get me wrong, I do think ideas like the Barrage Vow are interesting and definitely things worth expanding upon and other things for certain. But yeah, overall, it's a good run and obviously, and Vader overall always has pretty good runs. So yeah, those are my final thoughts of the first volume arc of Charles Soule's Vader.
It's as if he's the best character in Star Wars. It's as if he's the best character in all of fiction. He can spin out all these great stories, Vader, Anakin, all that question. Look, don't get me wrong. I'll agree. The Fortress Vader, that's I'll say this issue, this comic grows and grows on it.
Yeah.
If this arc is perfect, those arcs are perfecter. That's the way I put it. And just being reminded of everything, hitting the ground running, doesn't need any time to really get a feel. Charles Soule just said be chemical. He didn't really need to get any time to get a feel of what they were going to say, what they're going to do. They very clearly, right from the first page, knew they were going to show this progression of this character from shaky newbie Sith, neophyte Sith, into this Dark Lord of the Sith who has his own castle and is fully committed to the cause, and that gets foreshadowed here in this arc. Even to the point of exploring the influence of Obi-Wan in his life. It bookended by these two visions with involving Kenobi, involving Padme, involving all these things. I keep bringing up how the crossover, the Kieran Gillen and Jason Aaron crossover, was the promise of what the way Star Wars comics, Darth Vader comics especially, could explore the relationship between Anakin and Vader, could explore the relationship between the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, and how it's one continuous story. This comic is the promise. This comic is the fulfillment of that promise. This is the payoff. This is just this whole run becomes everything I want in Star Wars. I talk about that. I say that, you'll hear me say that and again in a few months about something, but yeah, right from the get-go, and it was great to just remember just how fantastic. I'm satisfied with Kuruk. He stands out as such an iconic character. My buddy Kareem did a cosplay of him immediately. And the one that both Charles and Giuseppe really took to. So shout out to that. Yeah, just stands out. And yeah, really grateful now that he's coming back and that they are exploring his story, centuries earlier, but exploring why he took the brash vow, why, because he may have been like this the second, there's the thousands before the founding of the Jedi Order. You can reinterpret that line if you want, whatever, that's fine. Why he takes this vow as well, why Porter took the vow, exploring all that, this thing that just got introduced in these two issues of a comic book. And again, that's the Soule verse, the Charles Soule verse, exploring, setting things up and paying them off in meaningful and beautiful ways, poignant ways that speak to what the Force means. You can talk about his interpretation of what the Force means, telling gripping, compelling stories, what it means to serve the light and to retreat in peace and to serve the light versus to step out in darkness and try and serve yourself. And again, really, my favorite comic of all time, and it started right here with this arc.
Nice. Also, you just reminded me. Yeah, the first spoilers, big spoilers for Fortress Vader at the end of the whole comic. But you know what, we got to talk about it because we can talk about it here, and then we can talk about it again when we do it. First thing Vader says in this comic, no. Last thing Vader says in the end of the arc, yes.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, he said yes.
That's intentional. That's completely intentional.
Now that's a good callback. But yeah. I mean, that's where I feel like the overarching arc stuff is definitely the strongest.
I'll say this. On the tractor beam a few weeks ago, I said, Dark Droids is Soule being able to take in his out of the box way of thinking, but what it really is like with 8 billion genies with Undiscovered Country, his ability from these creator-owned indie comics to really plot things out. 8 billion genies is a masterpiece in pacing and structure, and just from the premise and the way the premise can lead things through. This Vader comic has that same level of genius pacing and just having a fully, you want to talk about someone who's in control and in charge. You talk about there's the phrase, an author being in charge of their material and their work, and having just a sense, knowing how to tell a good story, having a sense of everything, plotted out, planned out, sorted out. Yeah, I'm sure some things were discovered as they go, and we know with Undiscovered Country, things are being discovered as they go. Less so 8 Billion Genies, you had to. It was only 8 issues, and the premise really kind of drove that structure of the time jumps, and I won't spoil what that is. You should go read 8 Billion Genies, by the way. That's going to be, once the strike is over, that is going to be a TV show. Just putting that out there too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Has
but
it been announced or?
It's in development. It's
nice.
in. I'm just the writing's on the wall for that, and it'd be an easy one to make too. Just because it's 8 episodes. It's the opposite problem, right? It's here are 8 issues. It's 8 episodes. Right there. Yeah, reminding us, and again, reading this run, this first run of this Vader arc, the first arc of this Vader run back, seeing how from the get-go he had everything sorted out as much as much as he needed to, and has figured out. So yeah, I mean, again, why he's my favorite comic author, he's my favorite author in Star Wars. I mean Claudia Gray would be my favorite prose author in terms of novels, but my favorite comic author, and yeah, this is why.
I mean, I have enjoyed Soule's comic stuff more than I think I've enjoyed his with one novel, Lad the Jedi.
Yeah, Lad the Jedi.
But
he's written. I mean, he's written his own independent novels too. But yeah.
I mean, to be fair, Lad the Jedi, I would love to see like him do like a straight up like not like this kind of quasi anthology thing with like a gazillion like just like. I don't know, tell the Darth Moment story about Darth Moment by one character.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's more than one character in this story, but you know what I mean.
I love that Darth Moment novel, Charles.
Oh, I would love it. Man.
Like
that.
Not necessarily a comic, a novel.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like I'm shocked that has not happened. Like that's a character.
Now I want that. Now I need that. Thanks, Joel.
I wanted. I wanted to because it would take place in the Old Republic time, more or less. So
maybe that's why they were holding on.
Like I would love just kind of like here's Darth Moment's story. What's his life about? Because he's sort of a character who's definitely gotten a lot of expansion. Well, he's gonna get expansion. You know, we're gonna talk about him hopefully soon. But yeah. But those are our final thoughts. Both enjoyed it. We both had a lot of fun talking about this, and hopefully we'll talk more comics and arcs. We're gonna break this promise right now. We're not gonna be maybe we'll do Charles Soule in order just because we're going to do it, but we will kind of be hopping around the comic book world.
There's great moments in Paper Canon thing. We'll whatever strikes your fancy.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I would love to just go straight to Fortress Vader now, but I might decide. You know what? For the sake, we'll just keep going.
At some point, yeah, we can. At some point,
order.
We'll yeah.
But yeah, those are our final thoughts, and I think that's about it for tonight.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everyone for sticking around, for checking us out. Yeah, let us know what you thought in the comments below. What do you think of Charles Soule's Darth Vader run? What do you think of everything I wrote? Legends being influencing canon, understanding of canon, comic book adaptations. Yay or nay? I'll say nay. By the way they've been done. I'll say that. The way they've been done. They can be better. Let's hope they are. But yeah, let us know in the comments below. Those aren't going anywhere on Facebook, on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. Wherever you're getting these comics or the comics. I mean, got comics on the brain. Or you get comics at your local comic book shop. That's where you get your comics. Where you get wherever you get your podcasts here on the Star Wars Underworld Network. You're the Iron Cannon podcast on our different channels. Yeah, Joel, where can they find you?
You can find me at JID2021 on Twitter. Again, JID2021 on Twitter, or of course at the Iron Cannon Pod on Twitter. But for the most part, you can find me at the Star Wars Underworld Discord, where we talk all sorts of things, games, movies, etc. We play games, we watch movies. It's so much fun. Join us.
You mean you don't play movies and watch games? That's what I do.
That's good. Yeah.
There you go. You can follow me on Twitter at NEOG45, Instagram and Threads at MEOG1138. Probably get some. I'm going to New York Comic Con in 3 weeks, so you're definitely going to check that out. The Tractor Beam is going to assemble in New York City in the Big Apple, and of course, Twitter, Instagram, Threads at On Canon Pod. I'm in the Discord too, somewhat, posting some things here and there. Some news about another Disney franchise that I thought was interesting, and different things there. And yeah, I mean, probably post more stuff from New York Comic Con in the Discord. So check that out. And then of course check out the Tractor Beam 12:15 right here, 12:15 Eastern, right here on all these Underworld socials. YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter. Underworld and I on Canon, Twitch and Twitter. And then yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, so check us out then. Yeah, Chris and I have gone strong, getting some really good conversations in our good lunchtime break there. I don't eat on air, I eat after, but I eat while I work. But
I've eaten on air a couple times because it was dinner
yeah,
time.
yeah, I don't like doing that. It's so I make the sacrifice. I delay my lunch till 1 p.m. while I work, just so you can all enjoy what I think about comic books. But yeah, that's what we're up to. And yeah, again, I'm in the Discord and all that fun stuff. Next week, we're continuing our great moments in Paper Canon. I'm taking a break because I'm going to an event, but we got the best guest of all time coming back, in my opinion. Coming back, and you guys are talking about the blue guy. Great moments in Paper Canon. Yeah, Thrawn by Timothy Zahn.
He's
Yeah,
blue,
that guy. Looking
I'm
back,
at church.
I believe said guest has just read that novel too. So
Yes,
that'll
said
be
guest
fun.
has, and I'm going to make sure said guest is gonna still come for Monday to make sure everything we have a
Yes,
show
and
for
not
you
have
all.
their own stream. Anyway, we're not salty. We're happy. Anyway,
Love ya.
yeah, great moments in Paper Canon. Thrawn by Timothy Zahn.
2017.
Yeah,
2017, though.
2017 Thrawn is that book always deserves more conversation. Why not? It's one of those landmark moments, I think, in the paper screen relationship and in Paper Canon too. So yeah, check us out. Well, check them out. I will be enjoying a soccer event. That's a whole
Nice.
other thing. Anyway, until then, let's pull this thing and head home.